Word. What's up, guys? I just wanted to give you a tutorial on how to get text animated in some basic ways. And this should be just some introductory ways to make words appear like they're moving, like they're blurring, scaling, all those fun things. So we'll go through those and I'll show you this with some baby steps. And now, since we're not in the lab, you can actually see some things that we're talking about one-to-one. So that'll be a little bit helpful for us. So what I'm going to do here is go to composition, new composition, 1920 by 1080. Hey, that's good. 30 seconds and square pixels. All that is looking good. I'll hit OK. I got a black background. Let's fix that. Right click over here. New, solid. I have this pretty blue. I'm going to use that. So pale cyan, that's what this is. And that's okay. Cool. All right. Now, text tool. If you left click on this, you have two options, horizontal or vertical. Horizontal will give you words that go this way. Vertical, you get what I'm doing. Yeah, hopefully. So I'm going to use horizontal and I'm going to click over here and I'm going to type word. And now I'm going to use my move tool and let's just, let's say something wasn't here. As a matter of fact, it didn't show up for me yet. There is a tool that you can use to align your objects to your screen. And one of those beautiful tools is going to be located under Window. And you guessed it, it's under Align. And that gives us this little option here. Now I can press the horizontal and vertical and bam, I have my word in the middle of my composition, which is pretty easy and nice to work with it like that. Now, you also have a lot of different changes for your word. Now, over here, I am using Digit Alt. That's my text that I have. I have my color, and I have my size. So you notice I can change that. When I change that, you'll notice that my alignment's no longer in the center, so I'll just have to click that again, and now I've fixed that. So that's pretty easy. I also have things, we'll get into these in more advanced settings. But this is how we can easily just adjust just some color. And if we needed to add stroke on that as well, let's say that it's a purplish color. There we go. So now we have just a little bit of a stroke on there and we have our text all showing up on that. So that's some basic stuff. So how do we get into actually animating this thing? Well, some of the first things we can think of is transform. And so if I open this up, there's my transform, and I have my scale, rotation, opacity, anchor point, all the things that we're used to doing since we've started in this journey for our class. So if I go to my position, and if I go over from one side, hit that key, and then let's go maybe let's go half of that. Let's go about a second in and we'll make this go over there. All right, now we can animate that. Isn't that exciting? Okay, so same thing with scale. We can do that. We can also do things with rotation, opacity, all those fun pieces, but that's kind of boring. Let's open up text. Okay, so we have our text here, and if I go under path options, we're going to go in some advanced spots in the next video on how to adjust that. But we also have anchor point, character, fill and stroke. So there's a lot of different settings that we can change on this. Again, this will be in advanced settings for later. But this is how we can start to move some stuff around. The one I want you guys to focus on is our anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. And I want us to look at things like skew. So all of a sudden now I have skew and I can change the direction of the word. So maybe if this is driving in, at first when it's off screen, that skew should be back. So let's say it's going over here, and then when it stops this way, it's going to throw itself the other direction. Hey, we did an exercise like this with our principles of animation. So this is an easy way we can do that. Now, this is, and some of you did this wrong, where this is happening before we move forward. So how do we actually get that to not cause that to happen? Well, we would just right click on the text here, add keyframe, and we're going to hold that position until we hit the brakes essentially. We'll have this lurch in the opposite direction now. So now when it's moving forward, it's not going to lurch towards that other side early. So that's good. Now we want that to probably bounce back a little bit in the other direction. And then maybe we'll just really end that so it's at 0. So I'll enter 0. So now if I have that happening, ooh, okay, so cool. It's a little slow. Let's grab both the position and the skew. Just left click drag, and now I'm gonna adjust that timing. It's a little bit better. Let's grab these and then move these a little bit closer too, and all right, it's getting there. Now, if you're getting to the point, remember you can't adjust these because they're too close together. Zoom in, and now I can see where those problems are. I can try to get those a little bit quicker, closer together. And now, okay, that's much better. So that's kind of cool how I can do that. And this is a nice little way that we can animate. Now, if this isn't really the words we want to use, we can just change that out. We can select this and call this race car. And all of a sudden, cool. Now it's off screen, so we'd have to adjust our position on that. But you're getting the idea. I'm going to just call this fast. So I have that text. I'm going to select it and call that fast. There we go. So that's pretty neat. I can animate using Skew. I also can do some other stuff. So let's say that let's adjust the fill color. So maybe I don't like the red that's on there. So I'm going to go with a RGB. Yeah, you know me. And I'm going to change that to maybe not being gross red. But let's go like that. Okay, so now all of a sudden we have a different color on our object. Now, maybe when it's coming in, it's going to be orange, and then when it ends, it's going to be a whole different color. So let's start with orange. We'll hit the stopwatch or add a keyframe, and then we're going to change our color. So just going into here, and let's say that it goes like that. All right, let's see what that did. And you guessed it, it changed colors. Super exciting. Maybe it shouldn't be that fast for a color change. Maybe it should happen right at that end. So it should continue all the way to that. So easy ways we can adjust that. Now, there's something interesting happening here. Every time I add one of these animators, so I have Skew and I have my fill color, it's also giving me these range selectors. So if I go into here, what this range selector is doing is it's allowing for me to basically to determine where this is going to be influencing my object. So when I look at my start and end, the start is happening right here. So that's 0. End is at the last letter. So if I back that up, all of a sudden notice how I can change the way this is affecting my text. So maybe, let's see if we can just riff here. Maybe I'm going to have this start over, if you hear weird sounds in the background, my heater's going off. Okay, so maybe I'm going to have to start let's say there, and then when it gets to the end, I'll animate that so it goes down to 0. So let's say that it's this first letter that's that bright color, and it's going to transfer to the end when it gets to the end. So let's say around here, I want to start this. If I move forward and I bring that all the way down, let's see what that did. All right. Not super obvious what it did. So what I'm going to do is change the colors here. I'm going to reverse this so it's red in the beginning and then orange at the end. So let's just change these up. I could have just switched the keyframes too, but I'm tired. All right. Okay. So you can kind of see how that's working. I'm not saying that this is maybe the best thing to do for that, but you can see how our range selector influenced this. You can also do a lot of fun stuff with range selectors, like, let's go with blur. And now I have another animator here, and blur is currently influencing this entire object. And if I increase my blur, so let's say that when it's first coming in, blur is going to be all the way up to, let's say 26. So I'm going to animate that at 26 in the beginning, and then as it hits the end, so it's stopping here, I want that to go down to 0. Okay, so now if I play that, kind of an interesting way to represent that. This is by no means an amazing looking example here. I'm just showing you how range sliders or range selectors and some of these effects can work, but you can see how it's blurring and then no longer blurred. Now this isn't really a motion blur, it's just blurring that out. We could add this to our effects, and I'll do that in a second. We could also say maybe it's just the front of this. So if I go into my range selector on my blur, and that is under here, if I go to maybe it's just the T that's blurred out, and so if I back that up, you can see that T's blurred out and then it goes away. Not that I'd need to do that, but this is just a way to adjust that. So for your first exercise, what I want you guys to do is to take one word and base that off of your morph project that you did for me. And I want you basically to take that one word and animate that word, either the scale, blur, position, all of those things combined, however you want that, to show an effect of a word maybe coming in from off screen. So maybe you did something about breakfast, so maybe it has to do with a word about breakfast, or maybe casinos. Some sort of a word that you can animate coming from either off screen, or it's coming from being blurred out and it's showing in focus. I want you to animate that text using text animators like the things that we're using here and under our animate. So we can animate these here. And I basically just want a word to move and use some forms of animation. So some forms of object transitions for this. Now, let's get back to this one. So this is coming in, and I'm going to go ahead and add a effect. And I'm over on this side, and I don't see an effect. Where can those effects be? Well, that is not showing up right now in my layout. I can change that by just going to Windows, and let's see. If I go to my effects, and let's go to motion blur. So I'm just going to type in motion, and I see, let's try pixel motion blur. I'm going to drag that on my text. Okay, now that I have that, it should pop that down into my effects here as well, and I have that showing up here, so I can just keep track of that. I'm going to start. Actually, I like that already. Let's see what this does. Let's hit the space bar. So it's going to render that. And there we go. So now, let me just change how far this is, and let's just play that. Oops. I want to mark the end of my animation, let's say at around here. So I'm going to hit the end key, so I'm only going to get that bit. Okay, so it's blurring, and it ends. And really, the shutter samples here, it's just set at 5. The more of that, the more that's going to take, and the more it's going to sample between different areas within the timeline. And notice this takes a lot longer to be able to pre-render that, but the more dramatic that effect's going to be for you. So we'll give that a second to catch up. And again, that's a hot mess for the color transition, but you kind of get an idea of what I'm doing here. So that's almost done. And again, if your computer can't handle all that, it's not a good, notice this is the real time is not able to play back that. It's just too much. Shutter samples, 5. That's a lot better. So cool. So that's what I want you to do. Don't pick fast. I want you to pick a word that is incorporated with your, long day. A word that's associated with your morph project. And I want you to play around with adding some effects. And I want you to play around with the the object transitions, the range selectors and the text animators that I talked about right here. So, and I have a bunch of sample stuff for you guys to check out and some other tutorials that go into greater depth on all these things.